Come on by and have a bite at the Crossroad Diner, the place where your spirit goes when it might be time to change direction. Hey everybody, Steve McCurdy here, host of the Crossroad Diner, and with me today is Jim Donihee. And we're going to talk some about what Jim does now. But I had told Jim that being at the Crossroad Diner is about making choices, about tough times when you had to make a choice. And, he was a fighter pilot in Canada. He's had a lot of experience. He was a commander of a base before he got out. So talk to us about that decision point that was challenging and what those elements were.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Steve. It's wonderful to meet you. And it's just a dream to be here and to be able to share some lessons and some experience with your listeners. I lived that little boy's dream, I guess. I grew up in a very modest home, very small town in Eastern Canada. And, just like most little boys, I guess, I dreamt about flying, and in some way, somehow, it played itself out. I served in Canada's military in our Air Force for 28 years. I was really blessed to fly, some of the best jets going at the time. I started out on the CF-104, the Starfighter, through several aircraft and whatever, but graduated eventually to the F-18. I did Canada's Top Gun school, and it was, it was just fabulous, and what meant the most to me always was, working with really fine people and being close to people, being in a place where I could, make a difference in their lives. So blessed to end up, as you mentioned, leading Canada's largest Air Force base. And, what touched me always was the recognition that I worked for them, not the other way around. My job was to make the conditions as best as possible for them to succeed, to do a darn good job, but to have some fun along the way and to make sure that their families were looked after. And so that decision point that you asked about came for me, that command tour is normally 2 years. And then it was, okay, time for bigger and better things. You get to go to, our National Defense Headquarters, which is in Ottawa, and you can go and play all the political games, and you can disappear into this headquarters and sort of lose touch with aircraft and people, the two things that meant the most to me. And so, the military is a wonderful life, but it's a tough life too. I had 28 years of dragging the family all over the world every few years. And, my children also reached that point where I was like, Dad, we need to drop an anchor here. We got to call someplace home eventually, and wonderful experiences for them, but for them too, giving up their friends every few years as we moved and so on. So long story short, I elected to leave the military in 2000 and was recruited into industry here in Calgary, where my home is now. And I've been here since, and it's amazing to think that, since the year 2000, I've lived here now just over 20 years, is the longest I've lived anywhere in my whole life, which is, quite an interesting accomplishment among others.
So, having been in American Air Force myself and knowing a little bit about how that life is, the autonomy that you have and the absolute subjectivity that you have to the mission and the whims of others and leadership. When you got out, one of the things that when we were talking earlier, you were saying that the thing that affected you most was the effect that you had and the impact that you had on the lives of those people that you served with and on the bases there. And I think anybody that's in a service position finds that's their paycheck more than the one that goes in the bank. And now you are working as a coach with industry. Talk a little bit with me about the differences and how that begins and what kind of service people get in working with your coaching.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things I've found most striking, I guess, was the stereotypes that people apply to the military, and comparing different leadership styles and so on and moving to industry. And, I would often hear people say, well, it was easy to get things done in the military. You just order people around. And it's like, well, you might try that for a little while, but it's going to fall flat very quickly. I mean, clearly there's, operational circumstances where there's not a lot of time to stand around and debate exactly what you're going to do. But, when you're leading people in the military, um, at least my approach was one that says, like, I am 100% accountable for your well-being, for your success, for mission accomplishment. And I think, which differs a lot from industry, I'm equally responsible for your family's well-being when you're out of the country or when you're someplace on deployment, and I need to make sure that people are looked after.
Right.
And so, that was quite a contrast for me. And another which I found quite interesting too, moving into a large company that oil and gas company here in Calgary, and it's not that different from a lot of large companies where you have distinct business units that produce various aspects of the company's deliverables. And in the military, we have fun rivalry between squadrons and so on, but when all is said and done, you're all focused on getting a job done. And as I moved into industry and saw sometimes the competition between those business units in the same company was greater than it was working with their competitors, like the sharing of capital, the sharing of ideas, the sharing of best practices, because, the incentive systems can be aligned so strongly through the verticals that people don't collaborate within the same company. And I mean, to me, that was astounding. And interestingly enough, that was one of the roles that I first found myself in, was being the guy that
Really?
was responsible for, migrating knowledge and migrating practices across the company. And so, bumping head on into some of those systemic barriers within the same company, I just found somewhat surprising for the way they were set up.
The difference between the military and private industry obviously has, well, I think people assume there's more difference than there actually is, because it's management, right? I mean, and where the resources are coming from, and the profit motive probably changes, but every squadron I was ever part of, every wing I was part of, was highly competitive with other wings and other squadrons, and so you had some of the same pressures as brand X type things. So how do you find yourself working with industry now? What's the path to that for you?
So, I mean, a lot of the work that I do now, I tend to work with smaller companies now, although, I've spent a lot of time in the big companies as well, but I tend to work with companies that are anywhere from, let's say, 10 to, a couple of $100 million in revenue or so on, and maybe anywhere from 50 to a few hundred employees. And,
Right.
what I love most, many, many times, the entrepreneurs that are leading these companies are, brilliant men and women who may have,
Right.
just, incredible technical knowledge, but they've not often had experience in leading people, in building out the systems that really help an organization come alive, if you will, in terms of, making sure that things are aligned and making sure that people are accountable and making sure that, helping them position their messages and so on. So invariably it ends up, working either with the CEO in particular or the executive team. Because one thing that I know to be true is that, an organization will never be better than the quality of its executive team. As a leader, you don't get to choose when people are observing you. You need to be on your game, and you need to be aware of that, and you need to be, and I think especially now, as with the young folks that are coming along, like, for them, they have lots of options. They don't feel like they owe any debt of allegiance necessarily to a particular company, and so winning their hearts and minds and caring about them and helping them develop and helping them grow is critical. And one of the things that's key in that is actually knowing yourself, knowing who you are
Yes.
and how
It's got to start there.
how you can best, be your own best self in order to lead them. So
Absolutely.
I do a lot of work with folks that are, in those sorts of situations. And I also do some work with, and this is even more enriching at times, is working with, executives or CEOs who've kind of finished their journey, they just got off the treadmill, and now they're wondering, what was that all about? Like, I'm really not sure who I am, for crying out loud. Like,
They're sitting at the counter in the Crossroad Diner.
totally. And, and it's just such an enriching, beautiful circumstance to work with people, and I
Yeah.
think often they begin to realize that, what, the only thing I was ever trained to do was turn up the speed on that treadmill. And I went
Yeah.
fast and I went hard and I got a pile of gold maybe that I'm sitting on, or maybe I don't even, but who am I now?
Yeah. There's some great books on that, like Halftime and whatnot, where you hit that point of being reflective. You quit running long enough to look around and say, where am I?
Yeah,
Um,
beautiful.
Talk to me about your book. I love the cover of your book.
Yeah.
It is, it harkens back. It's probably not all about military, is it?
No, well, thank you for mentioning it. I put it out on the street, I guess, about just over a year or so ago, and I mean, that used to be my office. That's what I loved most about it, was sitting in that little puppy. It was a very tiny office, but it went really quick, and it could go,
Yeah.
get up to about 50,000 feet or so, and go to a lot of fascinating places. But, as I mentioned, my it's not all about military experiences at all. It's really intended to serve, that sort of sweet spot of entrepreneurs that I mentioned, anywhere from, that size company. And for a lot of them,
Right.
it's a tool book. It's a toolkit. It's, visioning talks about all of the kind of the key elements of knitting a successful corporation company together in order to get it going. So very pragmatic, lots of, templates and tools. And, I had a beautiful compliment yesterday from a CEO that I'm working with, who said, in an email to me, he says, Jimmy, I'm just using this book as a template for everything that worked out. Thank you for taking the time to write it and lay it out. And it just made my heart sing, because that's exactly what I wanted it to achieve.
So tell us the title and what came first, the content or the title?
Kind of evolved simultaneously, but the title for me, the common thread, and the point that I really wanted to make around that is,
Right.
I've been privileged. I've done military, I've done big corporate, I've done not for profit, I've done board work, and so the common thread for me is the people. As I said right up front,
Got it.
I'm that guy that says, the numbers are important, but you cannot lead an organization through an Excel spreadsheet. If your focus is sitting at your desk, 38 out of 40 hours, or 58 out of
Yeah.
60, or pick a number, hours a week, staring at Excel
Right.
spreadsheets to try and make the place work, it's just not going to happen. The common thread is people, making sure that they succeed, and that you acknowledge as the leader that, your job is to make the conditions right for them. And when they know you, when they understand that you care about them more than you care about your own success, or at least as much, that's when the magic starts to happen. They'll go to the wall for you.
Yeah.
They'll offer up their best ideas. They're engaged, and that's what makes the organization tick.
Yeah. Mutuality is essential, or the perception of mutuality, because you can have mutuality and they don't know it. And,
Yeah.
But the interlock of mutual goals, mutual success, the tide that raises all boats, is necessary to be perceived by everyone, so that you don't get into, I don't think it eliminates political battles, but I think that it helps mitigate that and moves things toward greater relevancy. Because I know in the late 60s, when people started moving from innovation to bean counters running the companies, because they wanted to get efficiency, and bottom line was the whole thing. And they even, to a great extent, through there, started eliminating the the value of personnel, the value of knowing who you're dealing with. You were a resume, you fit into this hole, but they missed a lot of the power of the synergy and of people that you're talking about. I'm glad that and probably in the last 20 years have moved back toward trying to, we know that we have to, because the generations, my kids, and the ones that have come up since then, as you say, they don't come in with a loyalty to an idea. They've got a big, what's in it for me, but not in a angry way. Just, okay, why should I be doing this? If I understand my why, maybe I'll give more of myself to this, So when people that are listening, maybe it's an executive running company stuck in a position, how do they begin to work with you?
And they could come see my website. My website is HighFlightExec.com. All one word. I mean,
HighFlightExec.com.
That's correct. Yeah. All one word strung together, HighFlightExec.com. There's an opportunity there to reach out to me. It's pretty simple. My email is my name, Jim Donihee @gmail.com, all one word. And I just love engaging with people and helping them, begin to look in the mirror and understand themselves a little bit. And oftentimes that's where the biggest challenges lie. I think when I work with leaders a lot of times and guide them to that place and say, I'm never getting what I want, first place to look is in the mirror often when you're not getting what you want as a leader. How clear are you? How engaged are your people? How heartfelt is, the manner in which you work with them and the way you treat them. And so, as I said earlier, and that's the essence of the title, is the common thread is people. And, vulnerability, authenticity.
Oh,
I mean, these are such cool words, right? And like, I remember the first time I was, so blessed to take over a squadron, of about 300 personnel. And the night before the change of command ceremony, when I'm, being installed as the CEO, if you will, of this squadron, oh my God, what am I going to, I have to give a speech. What am I going to say to these people? I have to be profound. I have to really say something that will be important, and the truth is, who I really needed to be was myself. I just needed to tell them that, what, here's who I am. Here's how deeply I care. And my mission over these next few years is to prove that to you and to let you truly understand how much I care and how privileged I am to lead and to work with. It's not you, it's us working together. And and so creating those kind of circumstances and adopting that sort of approach has always been my thing.
So Jim Donihee for the Crossroad Diner, and the common thread is people. You're certainly singing out of our hymn book with that. Thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure, Steve. Such a thrill to meet you and to have an opportunity to reinforce the messages that you do so well on your platform.
Thank you. We'll see you next week. Now, Monday is Crossroad Coaching. We're going to be picking one idea apart through the lens of who, what, when, where, why, and how. We'll see you there. Help us get the word out to folks who might be in a place where their spirit thinks it's time to change direction. Give us a like or even a subscribe, and we'll see you next time in the Crossroad Diner.